Do you want to be the guy or a gal that everyone knows really knows their stuff? To be the go-to when your friends have a really interesting question? If you have an interest in history and you like maps, I have a 2-step program at the end of which you will love history, will be obsessed with maps, and will be the guy or a gal that people look to for the answers. I know this program works because it's what changed me from a run-of-the-mill trivia nerd into the Mensor Modicus and possessing all that title implies. Are you ready? Here it is. Step 1. Buy these 2 books. Step 2. Open them. That's it. From that point on, you won't be able to help yourself. These books are going to grab you by your frontal lobes and pull you in them brain first, and it will not let go until it has rebuilt your brain. When it's done, you will love history. You will be obsessed with maps, and you will have a new eye for recognizing and appreciating truth in a world where probity is rare. Here's my story. It was about 45 years ago that I found these 2 books for a couple dollars each at the used bookstore. Once I peeked at the contents, I could not buy them. And once bought, I couldn't set them down for days. Now that I think about it, I realize that the books are set up a lot like a TikTok. They have that addictive just one more dynamic to them. Let me show you. They're called the Penguin Atlas of Ancient History and the Penguin Atlas of Medieval History, both by Colin McEvedy. And that right there is a clue to their awesomeness. You'll never see an author's name on an atlas. Pretty much every other atlas you've ever seen is really just a collection of maps and art that the publisher already had on hand. They just reuse the same stuff over and over, hire an intern to write up some text to hold it together, and ship them out to Barnes & Noble. But these books were created by one man with a vision. I'll tell you more about him later. So let's open one of these up. We see on the left is a page of text, and on the right is a map. This being the medieval atlas, it's a map of Europe, the Mediterranean, and the Middle East as far as Iran and the stands, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, etc. Notice the prominent date on the map. When I turn the page, I see the same thing. Text on the left, map on the right. And it's exactly the same map, just 50 to 100 years later. Turn the page again, same thing. You see the evolution of the whole region, step by step, with everything explained in context. Everything everywhere gets covered. It's not just cherry-picking whatever the publisher happens to have some artwork to illustrate. So let's think about this for a minute. I'll use football for an analogy. A lot of people, all the football they watch is the highlight plays that show up on X or Instagram. If that's all you see, how much do you really know about football? But you know that in the NFL, they put cameras over every part of the field. So imagine being able to watch each play, one at a time, with all these cameras covering every player, what each player is doing at every moment. It won't take long before you start understanding football almost viscerally. While everyone else just sees a quarterback getting pounded into the ground by a safety, you're going to see the play call, the blown assignments, the missed reads. You're going to be that guy that everyone asks, how'd that happen? And that's what these books are like. Except these books are going to turn you into that guy for history. That is, for the stuff that really matters. That's the concept. Most of the maps are straightforward. They show the extents of the kingdoms and tribal groups at the time. We have some shading to show some cultural distinctions. The different types of borders also have meaning. The text, well, I hope your eyesight is good because the text is really small. And some pages have even smaller text because McEvedy has a lot to say about everything. But don't be put off. The author is really, really good. He writes for the ordinary Joe. No jargon, bright descriptions. You would think that with this format, the text would end up being repetitive. It isn't. He finds what was unique in every situation and brings it front and center. He also mixes in just an occasional touch of his droll British humor. He makes it a fun, easy read. And the scholarship is deep. Yet Colin McEvedy wasn't a, quote, real historian. By profession, he was a psychiatrist, and from what I can tell, a really good one. I say that because he was the kind of doctor that the other doctors hate. He was on the wrong side, politically, of every controversy he entered. But in every case, as far as I can tell, he was always proven right in the end. But you know how this story always goes. The verdict always comes in years late and never with the apology deserved. What was true for Colin the doctor was true for Colin the historian. In college, McEvedy was close to a history degree but chose doctoring instead, so he never got his PhD. But the lack of formal recognition didn't stop Colin from jumping into disputes with the so-called professionals. And it was these atlases, in fact, that put him right in the middle of some of the biggest disputes of the era. And yes, he was generally disregarded or despised at the time. And yes, decades later, the consensus shifted to Colin's point of view. Not in everything in every way. Lots of new things have been discovered that McEvedy couldn't have foreseen. But late in his career, despite his amateur status, Colin was being invited to speak at conferences, and his works still are frequently cited by the professionals. He finally received the best kind of credentials. He became that guy that even the professionals look up. Every so many pages, there's some specialty maps. For this ancient atlas, there are extra maps showing cities, trade routes, and the spread of literacy. The medieval atlas has the city and trade maps, plus maps showing the religions. It was these population maps that really put McEvedy at odds with the professionals in his day. It was the unchallenged belief at the time that, based on certain census records at the time of Caesar Augustus, that the population of Rome was over 1 million. This seemed to be a major point of pride among the classicists, and they didn't like it when Colin pointed out that the census in question was for the entire district, not just the city. And based on the known extent of the city and demographic evidence, 250,000 was a better estimate. The blowback was intense. You can still find historians who seem to take the idea as a personal attack. In the same vein, Cordoba, the Muslim capital of al-Andalus in 1000 AD, is still today almost universally given as 500,000 or so. This number comes from a single source, an Arab writer who had never been to Cordoba, but he's been quoted over and over again for 8 centuries now. Colin quietly pointed out that the city, with suburbs, only covered about 750 acres. To fit 500,000 people, Cordoba would have had to pack them in 6 times more tightly than in modern Manhattan. McEvedy suggests a more reasonable number of about 25,000, which still made it the biggest city in Europe at the time, just not the Baghdad of the West that so many historians seem so desperate to believe in. The academic types brushed off McEvedy as a crank, an incompetence, and, worst insult of all, a mere amateur. McEvedy responded the way a professional is supposed to, by keeping it to the facts. To support his calculations, he studied further afield, researching other ancient cities and the demographics of the rural areas too. He ended up writing several more books on demography in ancient cities. I have 2 right here. In this one, he doesn't just revisit Rome and elaborate upon his calculations. He goes through every single ancient city known to archaeology, from Alexandria to York, summarizes the evidence, and applies his methods to estimate the population of each of them. In this one, he co-wrote, he applies himself to total populations, not just cities. These were books that demanded respect, and for the most part, he eventually got it. Today, by the way, the most recent papers on the subject estimate the population of Augustan Rome at not 1 million, but instead no more than 450,000, and likely near McEvedy's estimate. As for Cordoba, that 500,000 number seems to be a matter of unshakable faith. No amount of evidence will suffice to dislodge it from the academic literature. You can try to explain it to me in the comments. Now I need to show you the map that will totally change how you look at maps. For me, seeing this as a teenager was as mind-blowing as when I first learned that there are multiple types of infinities. It's the first time I ever saw how geography can influence culture in deep ways. Even then I knew some basics, like that cities tend to be built where rivers meet the sea or near natural resources. And honestly, today I'm not a huge fan of the sort of geographic determinism that's been popularized in books like Guns, Germs, and Steel. Those theories tend to get stretched too far and underestimate human creativity and cussedness. But this map is different. It's much more subtle, more purely logical, and predictive of something far more surprising. It's one of the most amazing ideas I've ever seen. It starts with two basic observations. First, that there's a difference between life on coast and life inland. Obviously in terms of resources, but in ability to trade, vulnerability to attack, and other factors. Second, within a culture, there may be communities with different roles: farming, trade, mining, and so on. But where communities of a certain type are clustered, the nature of those clusters will define the culture. In America, we can talk about the cotton culture of the Deep South, or the coal culture of Appalachia, and so on. Armed with just these two facts, McEvedy went to work on this map. He put this in the preface to his Atlas of Ancient History. He described his method in this diagram. If you break down the map into a grid with just two types of squares, ocean or land, at the intersections, the ones that aren't surrounded by sea, of course, you imagine a community, which will either touch the sea or be landlocked. That much is easy. We really just made a jagged map of the coastline. Here's the genius part. To build a culture, it's the clusters that matter. Isolated coastal towns won't have much cultural impact, I didn't say economic, if all the communities around it are landlocked. So for each community, the points of intersection, McEvedy counts how many of its neighbors are coastal and how many are landlocked. If the majority are coastal, then he colors the spot blue, even if the spot itself isn't a coastal spot, because it's in a coastal cluster. He calls these blue spots littoral communities. Everything else gets colored white. Notice that on a straight stretch of coast, everything gets colored white because each of the coastal communities has just two coastal neighbors, but three landlocked neighbors. So the landlocked culture is going to dominate. This had to be a lot of work for McEvedy in an era before computers, but the results were worth it. There's maybe a lot less blue than you would expect. In North Africa, there's just a couple spots. But compare this to maps of the Greek and Phoenician world. It almost perfectly predicts not just where those cultures arose, but where they created their colonies. Almost every spot of blue, not just in the Mediterranean, but in the Black Sea too, became a colony for one or both of those cultures. And the other way around. Very few colonies were placed in the white areas. The correspondence is remarkable. You can even apply the map to the Middle Ages, just for the Venetian Empire, Aragon, and the Kingdom of Naples. Researchers have also applied this map to Ice Age era communities, Bronze Age era, Iron Age, and they've applied his method to other parts of the world, and always with similar results. It's interesting though. It took the academic types about 40 years before they started paying attention to this. But now it's safe to say that McEvedy's idea is not just accepted, it's now a core concept. For me as a teenager, to see how such a simple idea can have really profound consequences changed the way I thought about, well, almost everything. But especially about history and particularly about maps. These atlases freed me from worrying about memorizing names and dates. I'm still terrible with those sorts of details. And started me on looking for patterns and structures. I've read some objectively horribly boring books over the years and come away excited because I discovered some pattern I hadn't seen before, or it confirmed or disproved some prediction that I had made in my mind before. It comes down to this. Now I don't read books or study maps to be taught. I read them to discover. And I think that's how Colin McEvedy felt, and I think it's what he wanted to inspire in all his readers. So try my two-step program. Or better yet, get these two books into the hands of a bright young person in your circle and let them try the two-step program. And let me know what comes of it.